Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the grammar exercises from chapter 15 of the Road to Latin textbook. So like I always tell you, if you want to see this chapter, the grammar in a slightly different light, feel free to check out my website. You can find all the grammar there, the exercises. You can also find grammar notes, videos, things will kind of help you through. So if you're looking for just a little more to help you, this is always there to kind of guide you through and give you a little extra work on it, okay? Now we're going to look specifically at grammar exercise 4. This chapter has to do with noun-adjective agreement, and there's a couple other grammar exercises before this, namely 1 through 3, where you're practicing that. I'm going to skip over it because usually the one that I focus on are these fill in the blank and translate sections where you're kind of putting all the grammar together to see if you can create the right Latin words and translate it. So that's where we're going to focus now. But I would tell you that if you haven't done it yet, go back, read through the grammar, make sure you feel really comfortable with it on your own, and then use this video and these grammar exercises as sort of like a guidepost or a double check to make sure that you're on the right track. So if you can come up with the answers that I have and it all makes sense to you, that's probably a good sign that you're ready to move on. If you're looking for more grammar practice beyond this, I would always recommend that you go to Magistrula. If you're using my website, there's a Magistrula link at the bottom that'll help you practice a lot of this stuff and just give you mass repetition over and over again, as many sentences or sort of creating forms that you can handle. So there's always a lot of good ways to practice, but whenever you feel really comfortable with it, like I said, you know you're ready to move on. So if you haven't done that yet or haven't looked through the grammar, pause the video, go do it. Otherwise, let's dive in and go through these 7 questions, and I'll explain them as we go. Okay, so in the first one, you have Laika, poeta clarus ad Corneli domicilium saepe ambula. So the blank here is clarus. Now this one, I know from my own students, is one that always throws them off a little bit. Now, this looks a little weird because what you're learning in this chapter is that adjectives match nouns in case, number, and gender. And 99% of the time, maybe not 99, but the majority of the time, they're going to have the same ending because you're learning that adjectives, or this type of adjective, it's called the first and second declension adjective, right? The us, it's using the same endings as nouns, right? First and second declension nouns. So you can read through more of this, in the actual textbook, or like I said on my site. But long story short, usually whatever ending the noun has, the adjective will have the same one. And here you're seeing that for poeta, I put clarus, right? So the A and the US are obviously not the same ending. And there's a reason for it. You always want to think case, number, and gender. And in this case, the gender is really the difficult part. Poeta is one of the few first declension nouns that's not feminine, it's actually masculine. So when you're using an adjective to describe a poeta, a poet, you need to use the masculine form, which for adjectives is going to be us, e, o, e, orem, so, sis, right? It's going to look like a second declension noun. So this is why you have poeta clarus. It might not look correct at first glance, but it is, right? Because these 2 words, poeta and clarus, are matching in case, number, and gender. They are both nominative, singular, masculine. Okay, so this is a good one to dive in. And I know I'm taking a little longer to explain it, but this is a really good place to start because it'll show you that it's not just about matching endings. You always want to think case, number, gender. Those 3 things will never steer you wrong. Okay. So you're saying Laika, a famous poet, a poeta clarus, right, a famous poet, he often walks to the home, the domicilium, right, the dwelling or home of Cornelius. Okay, let's take a look at number 2. You have poeta fabulas gratas nara. Okay, now here, the adjective gratas, which is gratosa, pleasing, it's matching with fabulas, right? So you're trying to say the poet tells, right? The poeta nara, right? He tells something. What does he tell? Well, the direct object here is fabulas, right? Stories. It's accusative, plural. So when I use my adjective, pleasing, I need to match it to fabulas. Think case, number, gender. These are both accusative, plural, feminine. That's why you have that as ending on gratas. And this is an example of where the ending of the adjective just matches the noun, right? They're going to look similar. So you can always kind of tell which words are going together in Latin based on the ending. You have fabulas, gratas, right? So the poet tells pleasing stories. In number 3, you have liberi laeti poetam clarum amat. So here, laeti, happy, is going with liberi, right? Laeti is from laitus aum. Now, liberi, children, is nominative, plural, masculine. So that's why I'm using laeti here. The endings are going to match. You're saying the happy children, ama, they like or they love. Who do they love? Poetam, the poet. Okay. Now, clarum here is describing poetam. It's a famous poet or the famous poet. It's talking about Lyca. Now, here again, the reason it's um and not am is because poetam is a masculine word, even though it's in first declension. And that's kind of like what we saw in number 1. This might throw you off at first, but it is what's happening here. So again, case number gender, you have accusative, singular, masculine. That's why you're using clarum. So they love the famous poet. In number 4, you have in peristilo pulcro, poeta cum liberis bonis saepe sede. So in peristilo pulcro is describing the peristilo, right? It's the O ending, right, in the beautiful peristyle. Now, peristyle is peristilum. It's a neuter word. So this is neuter ablative singular, right? And if you think of the endings, it goes e, o, right? So the long O is basically matching here. But again, case number gender, just match it up and you'll be on the right track. So in peristilo pulcro, right, in the beautiful peristyle, poeta, there's your subject, the poet, often sedet, saepe sedet, he often sits, right? Cum liberis means with the children. Now, bonis here is describing liberis, right? So with the good children. These words are the same case, number, and gender, right? Bonis is matching liberis. They're both ablative, plural, masculine, because you're with the children, and cum always takes an ablative, okay? In number 5, you have fabulae de terris extremis pueris romanis sunt gratae. Okay, so extremis, extremos right, extreme or far off, is describing the terris, the lands. So de takes an ablative. When you're saying something about something, right, it's going to go with the ablative. So terris here is ablative plural. Okay, so you have, and it comes from terra, right? First declension, a feminine word for land. So you're saying the fabulae, the stories, right? And the stories de terris extremis means about far off lands. Okay, extremis is matching terris. They're both ablative, plural, feminine. Okay, so here, to find out what word gratae is going with, you have to think about this sentence, okay? So you're saying the stories are pleasing. Gratae here is describing fabulae. That's why they have the same ending. That AE ending is nominative, plural, feminine. So you're saying the stories are pleasing, and they're the stories about far-off lands, right, are pleasing, sunt gratae. Now, this needs a dative because it's pleasing to someone, right? This is one of those adjectives we've seen that takes a dative. Your dative here is pueris. It's pleasing, or sorry, the stories are pleasing to the boys. Now, romanis is describing pueris, right? These two words are going together. So romanis and pueris are both dative, plural, masculine, right? So you're saying the stories about far-off lands are pleasing to Roman boys, pueris romanis, okay? So that one's a little trickier as you try to piece together where all these adjectives are going. In number 6, you have fabulae de deabus puellas parvas delectant. So fabulae is my subject, right? The stories, they delight, delectant, right? So stories delight, and they're the stories de deabus, right? About the goddesses or about goddesses. And here's that alternative ending here, deabus, or when you have dea, use the abus ending, not is. So it's just ablative, right? But you're saying stories about goddesses delight. Who do they delight? Puellas. That's my direct object. They delight the girls. Now, parvas here is describing puellas. So parvus is a first and second declension adjective, right? It needs to match the same case number and gender as puellas. Puellas with that as ending is accusative plural feminine. So parvas is accusative plural feminine, right? So they're going to have the same ending here. Puellas parvas. You're saying stories about goddesses delight the small girls, or the little or young girls, you could say. All right. And then we have the last one, number 7. You have ludi liberorum parvorum poetae claro sunt grati. So your subject here is the ludi, right? The ludi liberorum, the games of the small children, right? So in other words, games is your subject, ludi. And it's going with this genitive, liberorum. Now, parvorum here is describing liberorum. Now, liberorum is genitive, masculine, plural. So parvorum is genitive, masculine, plural. You're saying the games of the small children, the liberorum parvorum. Okay, so the games of the small children, they are grati. Now, this is kind of like, I believe it was number 5 where we saw this. Grati is describing ludi. So the games are pleasing. Since ludi is masculine nominative plural, you have grati being masculine nominative plural, right? Ludi sunt grati. That's sort of our main core of the sentence here. So you're saying the games of the small children are pleasing to someone. Remember, you always need a dative. The dative here is poetai, right? That's first declension, dative singular. So to the poet. Now here again, it's a little weird because poeta, poet is one of those words we learned that's first declension, but it's masculine. So you always have to think case, number, and gender. Poetai is masculine, dative singular. So claro here also has to be masculine, dative singular because they're matching in case, number, and gender, right? So that's why we have poetai, claro. The endings look odd, right? Because you have an A-E going with an O. It doesn't feel right, but it is right? Because you're matching case, number, and gender. So you put this all together. And number 7, you're saying the games of the small children are pleasing to the famous poet, right? Like as watching the kids play. All right. So this chapter is definitely one of the ones where we're introducing a pretty tricky idea. Noun adjective agreement is one of those things that always throws my students off, right? Because it just doesn't feel natural. If you're a native English speaker, we don't do this, at least not to the extent Latin does. It just doesn't feel right. So the key to it, like I said, is just kind of hammering down the idea of case, number, gender, right? Case, number, gender, case, number, gender. If you remember that, that will always lead you in the right direction because your adjective needs to match the noun it's going with in case, number, and gender. So if you know the case, number, gender of your noun, match it with the adjective and you'll never be wrong. Okay. So if you want more practice on this, and I would recommend you do more because 7 questions aren't really enough to help you with this. I would highly recommend that you go back to the textbook, do the other exercises that are in there, and then go to Magistrula on my website. It's already set